Good afternoon. My paper is dedicated to Susan. She's here, and I apologise in advance for the nudity that's featured. So this paper continues the theme of gossip. I locate Susan in a tradition of gossips in British popular culture, exploring themes regarding middle-aged femininity and working-class culture. I'm going to look at how Susan's character is informed by the comic tradition of the unruly working-class matriarch, who is both strong and powerful, and yet whose excessive talk reinforces the social divide that she longs to overcome. Now, while I was thinking about this paper, luckily for me, on Facebook there was a discussion of Susan's character which provided lots of food for thought. I don't know if any of you were involved in this. I took some quotes from it. And I think this was a comment that instigated the discussion. And I was quite shocked, actually, by how negative the feelings were towards Susan. And these are some of the responses. So, one opinion, Susan is a cornerstone of Ambridge. We should all feel indebted towards her. Her loyalty to Neil and her family shows that she's a good person. Sorry about the typo. We'll all be lost without Susan. And here's some further. Yes, not quite so flattering. Charlotte, I can tell you who it was. There's a suggestion that she could be a witch there as well, a reference to the ducking stool. Yes. Now, I had to copy all of this out because, there we are, stupid, selfish, amazingly loose lips. She's here now, whoever it was who said this.
Okay, hand up.
Well, I can't remember exactly. It could have been just some face. It could have been the Archers, the BBC Archers.
Another group.
It would have been the BBC Archers thread. There we are. And I think this is an interesting one. She's definitely my character that I love to hate. So, for me, I'm thinking about why does Susan inspire such strong reactions? What does her character add to the Archers? She clearly divides and provokes listeners. She's a character who guarantees a reaction, as we have seen today, and that reaction is not always favourable. She's pilloried on account of her ignorance, her spite, her ambition. More often than not, just because she's opinionated and does not necessarily keep quiet. She's not a silent character. Ultimately, are we positioned to laugh at her on account of her working class identity and her presumption to aspire to a middle class lifestyle? Does her status as an outspoken middle-aged woman who refuses to be quiet make her more of a figure of fun and the object of disapproval? Now, my background is that of a film and media historian, and my research is about ageing women as performers and characters, particularly in comedy. So Susan Carter's my favourite. So I'm going to look at this broader history of battle axes, both in soap operas and way back through the centuries in European cultural history. And we're going to look at how Susan's character is informed by the comic tradition of this unruly working class matriarch. She's strong, powerful, yet her excessive talk, obviously, doesn't always do her favours. So, Susan. Née Horrobin, married to pig farmer and chair of the village council Neil Carter, both mother and grandmother, holds down 2 jobs, working in the dairy at Bridge Farm and managing the village shop. She made national headlines when she was imprisoned for harbouring her brother, Clive Horrobin, who was on the run. But Susan is not one to have let that hold her back, as she and Neil have worked hard to attain a comfortable position in the community, connected by the marriage of Christopher to Brian and Jennifer. She is fiercely loyal to her family. She's hard-working and she's driven in her quest for recognition and status. Now, the character of Susan is informed... Sorry, I'm referring to her as a character, and I now realise that's all wrong. Is informed by the spirit of the tradition of the working class matriarch. A powerful force dominates the family and home, whose sphere of influence is felt in the wider community. Let's have some academic background to this. Now, Richard Hogarth celebrated the role of the matriarch in the uses of literacy, recalling his childhood in working class Leeds. For him, the mother holds the working class home together more than the father, reaching the apotheosis of her maternal powers in early middle or middle age. When she has fully established herself as the mother of the family, she is then the pivot of the home, as it is practically the whole of her world. The domestic environment is where the working class matriarch prospers. The endless struggles and adversity consolidating her importance at the heart of the family and the community, and render her content. For Hogarth, he notes that despite physical deterioration and the stress of struggling to get by, our mam, as he refers to her, is a survivor. Susan is repeatedly humiliated, she is even imprisoned, yet her family have managed to better themselves, and she has managed to rise above her difficult start in life. Middle-aged, working class and outspoken, Susan Carter belongs to a broader tradition of comic types in British popular culture, as featured in the bawdy postcards of Donald McGill, with depictions of large, bossy women and their timid, henpecked husbands. The figuration of the middle-aged woman as a harridan and battle-axe has been a perennial source of humour, as with a long tradition of various soap opera matriarchs, which can be traced back to Ina Sharples here, described as a harridan in a hairnet with a surly expression that could stop a grown man in his tracks. We also have there Peggy Mount in the role of Ada Larkin in The Larkins, but I'm sure you can all think of lots of other examples, for example Hyacinth Bucket in Keeping Up Appearances, Nora Batty in Last of the Summer's Wine. We could go on forever, and that would be a good discussion. But this legion of battle axes are largely working class, strong-willed, unstoppable matriarchs, beholden to nobody and comic in their social aspirations. This tradition of the working class battle axe recurs throughout wider European cultural histories in Britain and beyond. I'm sure you've all read this. Historian Natalie Davis, in her work on festivities in early modern France, identifies the figure of the woman on top. That is, a recurrent figure of sexual inversion, featuring monstrous women who define normative gender relations as part of the spectacle of the carnival, when social hierarchies are suspended. These unruly women exploit any opportunity to prevail over men, with the carnival crowds enjoying the spectacle of the henpecked husband alongside his unruly, overbearing wife. This tradition is made vivid in Pieter Brueghel's Dulle Griet of 1562, which depicts a figure of Flemish folklore, also known as Mad Med, there she is, with Griet being a disparaging name for any ill-tempered and scolding woman. Let's cut a bit of the quote off. Brueghel was painting at the time of the Spanish occupation of the Netherlands, the figure of Griet being a celebration of fearless resistance against the odds based on Flemish folklore. She leads an army of peasant women, you can see them behind her there. They're dressed in armour, they're plundering hell. She's got a sword in her hand, her mouth is agape while she's clutching cooking utensils. So on one hand, these peasant women are comic grotesques, defying normative gender traits to such an extreme that they are fearless in the face of hell, but they're also triumphant, courageous and unstoppable. Dulle Griet was cited as an inspirational figure by Bertolt Brecht, who described her as the fury defending her pathetic household goods with the sword. I don't know if you can see where I'm going with this. Carol Churchill resurrected Dulle Griet in the play Top Girls as a feminist icon, portraying her as a revolutionary figure, explaining her invasion of hell as a defiant stand for her family and community. Is Susan Carter the Dulle Griet of Ambridge? This enduring figure of the working class matriarch as a comic grotesque works to grant agency and visibility for the middle-aged working class woman. The harridan perpetuates social unease regarding female ageing. This monstrous figure transgresses social norms. She defies the feminine ideal, yet she is rendered comic in her manifestation of qualities associated with masculinity, such as assertiveness and power. Kathleen Rowe, in her work on the unruly woman in comedy, says comedy can work misogynistically. The matriarch represents a dreaded domesticity and propriety. And she also goes on to describe one of her figurations as being rather shrill. Recognise that? So, social class is often a vital factor in the formation of the harridan, with Susan coming from a humble working class background, being one of the Horrobin dynasty. Bev Skeggs argues the working class are typically represented as other, as wild, chimerical, excessive, unknowable. Their bodies cannot be normalised or disciplined. Rowe observes that the working class body is likely to be the source of embarrassment, timidity and alienation because it fails to conform to the norms regarding the legitimate female body. Charlotte Martin, who of course plays the role of Susan, describes her character's background as coming from one of the poorest families in Ambridge, growing up in a council house with cars all over the front garden and a host of dodgy siblings. Susan's values are shared with the original Coronation Street matriarchs, described by Dorothy Hobson as found in the working class values of the 1950s, and the belief that hard work and gaining and retaining respectability were important qualities. Susan's social climbing has faced various setbacks, in particular her prison sentence. Hang on. Wait for it. Oh no, we're ready for that. This has got much humour at her expense, as exemplified with the Calendar Girls storyline, wherein Susan nervously agrees to be Miss October, only to find her modesty betrayed by revealing a little Susan's nervousness over her body, reflects her struggle to assert her claim to social status within the village. She has to be constantly vigilant about her image and that of her family to ensure she can stake a claim to be part of the Ambridge middle class. As listeners, and maybe we're probably largely middle class of being part of a Radio 4 audience, we relish the moments that the star slips from the vital part of Miss October. We relish Susan's pretensions being undercut. Susan's hysteria over the family photo shoot, putting Neil on a strict diet and agonising over her dress, is ultimately rewarded for us by the photographer failing to show up and Kira vomiting all over her yellow dress. The working class matriarch has always been the central element of the British soap opera, much like the triumvirate here from Coronation Street. For the Archers, Susan and Clary perform a similar role, connected by family and their work in the dairy at Bridge Farm, more often at loggerheads than not. Both of them are working class matriarchs, yet Clary accepts her role and is constructed as a more sympathetic character, who is the victim of the shenanigans of the Grundy men. Susan is the less sympathetic of the two. We might think of Neil being henpecked but loving husband who is constructed as being more likeable than his nagging wife. The Kathir storyline highlighted another aspect to Susan's character. Initially inspired by her customary competitiveness to try and beat Clary and impress Tom with her Kathir, the rivalry between the two evolves into a sisterhood as Susan sees past Tom's divide and rule approach to management and successfully manipulates the situation to engineer a pay rise and better working conditions for both her and Clary. Susan is the brains behind this, as she realises that she could play Helen and Tom off against each other, making Helen believe that the Kathir work demanded by Tom was compromising cheese production. Despite her best efforts, Susan's body, voice and behaviour all refuse the disciplinary discourse of white middle-class femininity. Susan speaks with a broad rural accent, her voice being rather whiny and insistently grating, with Charlotte commenting how the character started out as a Hardy-esque country girl. Her voice befits her role as a gossip, nuanced to wheedle information out of others. Information that she can weaponise and to ensure that she is fully aware of the personal dynamics of her community and can deploy that knowledge to help consolidate her status. Dorothy Hodgson observes that the Legion of Matriarchs in soap operas work as both the spine and nerve ends of the form. Their function vital to the progression of gossiping, which works not only as a recognisable character trait, but also as a way of ensuring our knowledge of the plot. Elizabeth Roberts, in her research into working class women of the second half of the 20th century, observed how gossip was an integral part of women's lives. It helped those experiencing difficulties in their lives. Nevertheless, gossip was also feared. It could ruin reputations. By being located in the village shop Ambridge Farm, Susan has access to a wide section of the Ambridge population, enhanced by her status as an in-law of the Aldridges and as wife to the chairman of the parish council. She is positioned centrally to the village and hence the narrative. Her contacts span social classes and the key families of the community. She is able to weaponise gossip to achieve her goals, although her comic status ensures that more often than not such manoeuvres backfire and she is once again humiliated. Her use of gossip gives her power and status, but equally works to isolate her, as she is inevitably avoided in dread of her capability to disseminate people's private details. Susan, back to Willow View, Ambridge View. Susan represents a marginalised social group in terms of her gender, age and social class, yet she is given licence and visibility within the tradition of the working class matriarch in the soap opera. She is largely a comic character since the melodrama of her incarceration, and as such is true to the spirit of the carnivalesque tradition, wherein the abject and the grotesque are allowed visibility and power. Yet ultimately, the status quo is maintained by consolidating the process of marginalisation through ridicule. Thank you.